Okay, thanks for being here, Amy.
Sure.
This is my first official interview with a futurist, so.
It's my first official interview with you.
Then here we go.
There we go.
We really can't go wrong. The bar is incredibly low. So tell me, I know Julie said a little bit about this, but what is a futurist? How does one become a futurist?
Right, so I don't have a crystal ball, right? I don't make predictions. So futurism is an academic discipline that goes back 120 years.
Yeah.
And the sort of popularity of my job rises and falls oftentimes with the enthusiasm around technologies that people don't understand. Mm-hmm. But it's a data-driven discipline that combines lots of different fields. So, statistics and, political science, and in my case, computer science, and other disciplines. And really, our job is not to tell you 10 years from now X will happen. Mm-hmm. Our job is to say, given what we know to be true right now, and we look very broadly. Right. So, these are the conditions and the dependencies that we see based on data. And this is how we would model out possible, probable, and plausible scenarios. Mm-hmm. And so, in practical terms, I work with senior leaders of Fortune 50s and the Department of Defense and the Federal Reserve on emerging technologies over the next 20 years. Okay. However, I also consult on some great movies and TV shows. There's one coming out in May called The First. It's Beau Williams's new show. He was behind House of Cards, on what the farther future looks like, but that's more for fun.
Okay, so my next question was going to be, when is the future?
When is the future? Well, so that's a good question, right? So when is the future? Literally, the future is 1 second from now, right. 37 seconds from now, 37 years from now, 370 years from now, simultaneously. So one of the biggest challenges that every organization faces is the tension between forecasting the future using data and needing to have that PowerPoint ready for the quarterly meeting. Mm-hmm. Right, and part of the problem is that although what we do is very much rooted in hard data, a lot of the outcomes are ambiguous.
Sure.
So that's you kind of have to get comfortable with the unknown, right?
Yeah, and there's this process, I think, exactly like you're talking about, of we are where we are right now, and we're also in the process of becoming something.
Right, right.
So, to what extent does the data that you have access to or that you're creating, mm-hmm. to what extent does that shape the way that you see the future?
That's a really good question, right?
Yes.
And it addresses, well, it is, because it addresses bias.
Right.
So a lot of times when you start doing futures work, and by the way, it's my belief that this should be, I'm a professor at NYU, and I teach this in the MBA program, mm-hmm. but I kind of believe that every leader should know how to do this work.
Yeah.
And the beginning of the work is figuring out what data you're looking at, and the mm-hmm. answer is there's no answer to that question. Right. So this is very Zen, but depending on what the project is, so Walmart, so we work with Microsoft on their AI mm-hmm. Stuff. In order for Microsoft to think about the future of AI, it has to think about the future of many different things simultaneously, because AI is not a tech trend, it's the third era of computing. If Walmart is trying to figure out the future of Amazon, it needs to think through things like retail and logistics and distribution, which also tie into AI, but it also needs to think about the future of CRISPR. So CRISPR is a genomic editing technique, mm-hmm. and that, why should Walmart care? Well, the reason is because so if you think of all these dependencies, Amazon bought Whole Foods. Mm-hmm. Whole Foods is a grocery store. Walmart is by volume the largest grocery store distributor in the country. Right. What we know is that on the near-term horizon, with all of the different climate events that are happening, we're going to have the ability to create produce and meats that require far less land and can withstand heat and climate and everything else. Anyhow, if you start connecting all of these dots, what the signals point to now is that it's probable that every single Walmart will not be a grocery store, but a grocery creator. And every single neighborhood will have its own micro farm where the produce is created, and quite possibly the meat is grown for harvest. Which tells us that, and that's probably on a 20-year timeline, but like now would be a good time for Walmart to start making those strategic investments, and they're not looking at any of that. So this is my way of saying, a lot of times the future arrives inside of an organization when the senior leadership finally become aware of buzzwords. My favorite one right now is blockchain. So everyone's sure.
Are you going to tell us what that means too?
Well, I mean, so cryptocurrencies have been around for a long time. Blockchain is not a new idea. And blockchain is the new Uber, right? So like 5 years ago, there was an Uber for X of literally everything. And that was just a shorthand way of saying, shortening the distance between right? So now it's blockchain of everything, right? The problem is that once you finally once that senior leadership team finally gets around to paying attention to the right thing, that future is gone.
So Adam, when he was talking with Mary Barra earlier, said this kind of work, analytics work, future work, is both art and science. It's science in that we're trying to get really serious about data, but it's art because we've got to decide what to measure in the first place. How does that kind of comment, how do you see that comment, and is there a blend of art versus science within this?
So my methodology is 6 steps, and it alternates between flared and focused thinking, and it also alternates between more concrete, sort of sciencey oriented work and much sort of broader, human-centered, creative thinking.
So the flare is expanding the aperture.
Right, and again, this type of work is always done on teams. So, you're always best thinking about the future when you have a strong methodology and you've got people who are cross-disciplinary. The worst possible thing any organization can do is to set up an R&D department and allow all of the innovation to happen there. Or to set up an innovation team and expect that all of the innovative thinking about the future is going to only come from that team. It's the best way to set yourselves up for failure. So instead, this is cross-disciplinary work. It should involve different types of thinkers. And one of the very first things we do before we get into any of the data is to do an assessment of the people that we're working with. What kind of thinkers are they, and where are their biases? And as it turns out, humans are really, really bad at self-reporting our own biases, right? So we help them out with that.
So for leaders then, for executive teams, how should they engage with this kind of work so that they do understand the direction of both industries and organizations? Right.
So, again, one of the, I think, challenges is, so all of my work and all of our work, we made open source a couple years ago. And all of our research is free and everything is in the public domain. My concern is that we're running headfirst into a future full of technology that we really don't understand and we're not making good decisions about in the present. And when people when leaders put off those big decisions to like once-a-year meetings, or they delegate those decisions to other senior leadership teams who themselves are not, maybe they don't have any real authority, the problem is that you wind up having to make decisions under duress. The best example of this is one you're already familiar with, which is BlackBerry.
Are you just bringing up BlackBerry because Adam Grant's from Canada?
Yes, that's exactly right. BlackBerry. But here's what was happening. So many, many years ago, if you had been paying attention to the right signals, which is not just looking at the future of mobile devices, but looking at behavioral shifts, pulling patents to see who was filing what information from where, looking at the proliferation of available data points. And anyhow, if you had seen all of these different things, the writing was on the wall a long time ago that our we had a nickname for this phone, we liked it so much. It was a crackberry. We named it after drugs in an affectionate way, right? But you could have seen that there's going to be some device that doesn't just do office productivity, that isn't just about calendars and email, but will probably be used for things like video and photos. If you think back to 1998, I was carrying a mini disc player and a Nokia 5180, and I had a digital camera and a GPS device. All of these things were starting to converge, right? and the CEO of BlackBerry found out about the iPhone the way that most people did. He saw a commercial for it. And even then, he didn't believe it. So his team, his senior leaders, got the iPhone when it came out, and they took it apart in the office, and it's reported that he said, "My God, it's a computer." So how does a company with 98% global market share and their entire senior leadership team miss this, right? It's because they weren't, part of it is they just weren't paying attention, and they had delegated a lot of that futures work out to other groups. So you can't do that. You've got to be willing to make incremental changes. You've got to be able to make decisions, micro decisions. And so sometimes it's as simple as, so I mentioned CRISPR, and maybe maybe some of you thought, oh, well, I wonder how CRISPR relates to my organization. So that's one incremental thing you can do when you leave. Go look up CRISPR and start doing some research. And don't delegate that out to somebody else.
So what I'm hearing in this is that the data is really important, the analytics are important, but there's something about process and culture which is going to support decision-making based on that data and analytics.
That's right.
Okay, and where are the pitfalls that companies are falling into? I mean, is it the annual meeting, quarterly meeting cycle?
Part of it is forcing the future to happen on your business calendar, like your schedule, your corporate calendar. The future,
that'd be much more convenient.
It would be. The future doesn't work that way. Right. Everybody loves S-curves, right, when they're thinking about the future, and the challenge is that the future doesn't follow an S-curve. That's good for tracking products, but in reality, you have to factor in chaos and chance. So most organizations don't have any wiggle room for chaos and chance, right? So part of this is learning how to be more flexible, which I know is very challenging, especially for big public companies who have to, by law, have reports at certain times, right?
Sure.
But your future shouldn't be 18 months from now. If that's how your company defines the future, you're not going to be around very much longer.
And so the micro decisions that you're talking about, I mean, there's a part of me that reacts to more data by saying more data, more analysis, that's going to slow me down. So how do you counteract that with micro decisions? Yeah,
so we have, and you can find them online, we created all these tools and matrices that are intended to help you quickly make a decision. So, I'll go back to CRISPR for a minute. That's a technology that we know has a high probability of penetration for many reasons, the least of which is lots of money, right? And efficacy. So what's the probability of this technology continuing to track high and fast? And then what's the relevancy of that to your organization? You may not be the best judge of that. Right, and so that sort of ties into creating a culture of futures work. Americans are nowists, more so than any other country. So in Europe and in Asia, there are people who are trained futurists who are at the C-level position within their organizations. Same thing with the governments, because they're thinking much longer term. We don't do that in the United. There are very few companies that really do that. So one easy way to get around this is if your instant reaction to something is no, then find somebody else who doesn't share that instantaneous reaction. My experience is that senior leaders aren't good at asking questions.
Yeah, and we heard that. That theme has come up over and over. That curiosity is going to fuel.
I don't know. I think they might be curious. But I think you sort of, over time, you get into this situation where you're in a boardroom or you're with other people, and it looks bad for you to
So ask. It's more a behavioral pattern.
I don't have data to support that, but anecdotally, sitting in meetings, like if I don't know what something is, I ask. And I seem to be the only person that ever does that. And I know that I'm not the only person that doesn't. No.
I don't know what a lot of things are. I want to be clear about that.
So do you ask questions?
I try to ask questions.
Is there
constantly.
a trick that you have that?
All I do actually is sit on stages and ask people questions.
There you go. Then you've got it nailed. Nailed it. Hashtag nailed it.
So we're wrapping up our time. As a futurist, what are you excited about in the future?
So I'm excited that we still have agency, and that we really do have the possibility to create the future that we want. I will leave you with two things. The first is There is a tremendous amount of misplaced optimism and fear when it comes to artificial intelligence. This is something probably every one of your organizations is thinking about. Don't believe the hype. So the robots are not coming to kill us all. The robots are not going to take all of our jobs. They will take some. But also, AI is not a panacea, and universal basic income is totally not going to work for our country. However, in the gray area, there is a lot that everybody should be thinking about, because we do have serious problems and also lots of opportunity on the horizon. And to that end, our annual report came out last week. This is free online. Not in print, but the digital version. We're tracking 235 emerging trends this year across 20 different industry sectors, and you can take it and do whatever you want with it.
All right. Thank you. Amy Webb.
Thanks.